Welcome again. We're happy that you could join us. This is our July edition of the Alumni Career Paths session from the Office of Career and Professional Development. My name is Mike Matrone. I'm the Associate Director of the office. And this month we are exploring public sector careers. So we have three alumni from UCSF who have pursued careers in the public sector as part of their career journey. We're joined, first, before we introduce who our speakers are, I just want to talk a little bit about why we do this. And we bring you these programs because we want to highlight that all careers for PhDs are successful career paths. There is still some stigma or some apprehension around careers that are not faculty careers, and we want to highlight all careers are successful ones. And we also want to highlight that representation matters, and we want you all to be able to see someone with whom you identify in these careers, so that you can see that there are those like you who have achieved what you are aiming to achieve as well. And the last aim is so that we can help you connect with the people who do these types of careers. So part of career exploration is talking to the people who do things that you may not know about. And that is exactly why these folks have joined you today. So going in reverse alphabetical order, in this case, we're joined by Miki, Sode, who is the Commercial Innovation Manager at the International Space Station U.S. National Laboratory, which I didn't even know was a national laboratory until I discovered Miki. So welcome. You can reach Miki through her LinkedIn profile, but she's also provided her email address below. Next, we have Anne-Marie Brighenti, who is a Deputy Chief at the Microbiology Review Branch of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease of the NIH. She also provided her email if you wish to reach out to her directly. And last but not least is Deshane Barnett, who is the Health Director and Health Officer at the Missoula City and County Health Department. And he has also provided his contact via LinkedIn and his email. So we do hope that through this program, you will feel a little more empowered to reach out to those who have careers that you may find interesting and may want to pursue for yourself. What we'll talk about today isn't all that we asked our speakers. And so we have a resource called the Fundamentals. These are 6 common questions that we ask all of our panelists for every month for these alumni career path sessions. And you can find them at this URL, as well as if you scan the QR code with your phone, you'll be brought to our website where you can peruse how our 3 panelists today answered these questions, but you could also see past programs and how our past panelists have answered them. Just so everyone is aware, we'll start what we're going to discuss today, We'll first start with some introductions, a little bit of career stories from our panelists. I'll have a few questions for our moderated Q&A, and this will be the recorded section. We'll stop the recording, and then we'll be open to all of those who have joined us today. So if you are now able to join for the whole session today, you'll be able to see the recording, or if you know somebody who wasn't able to join, please direct them to the recorded session that will be available on our website. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen so that I can also see all of you again. And we will get started with our session. Just give me a moment to get settled here. So we're going to start in alphabetical order. So I'm going to ask Deshane to start with us first, but this question is for all of you. And this is to just tell us your career story from when you were at UCSF to where you are now. Include what you studied, how your training led to where you are currently, and any other factor that you felt was important to getting you from where you are to where you are now from where you used to be. So Deshane, I'll ask you to kick us off.
All right. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Deshane Barnett. As mentioned, I'm the Health Director and Health Officer here in Missoula, Montana. I'm originally from Missoula. I actually ended up in California because when I started an undergraduate career here at the University of Montana, the University of Montana is in the same city, Missoula, where I grew up, and tried to do my undergrad and got placed on academic probation my first year because I had a blast. It was a great year, going to college with all my high school buddies, but I was not doing well academically. So my grandfather, who actually was a professor here at the University of Montana, encouraged me to maybe put some distance between me and my friends. And so I ended up in California. And so I was in California actually for 16 years. And I was a non-traditional student. So by the time I made it into the UCSF master's program, I think I was 37 or 38, and did my master's in healthcare administration because I had been working ever since I was 19 and moved down to California in the Indian health field, American Indian Health. So the Indian Health Service funds healthcare programs both on tribal reservation lands as well as in urban centers. And so throughout my career, I've worked at both the tribal and urban programs, and worked my way up from line staff up to administration, and really felt like the UCSF Healthcare Administration Masters was just a great fit for me because it was innovative. It was breaking out of the mold of, a very traditional, MBA for healthcare to, no, let's create a healthcare administration program that recognizes the uniqueness of healthcare administration and the challenges, the opportunities that brings. And so I did my master's in healthcare administration. And then even though that was very, focused on administration, I got the research bug while I was at UCSF, just being around so many brilliant researchers doing such great things. While I was at UCSF, I participated in NAHA, which is the Native American Health Alliance. So I got to, talk to other Native students who were in all of these great programs at UCSF. And I really got the research bug. So when I came back to Montana, in addition to continuing my career as a health administrator in Indian health, I also am a full-time PhD student in public health at the University of Montana, and that's a research PhD program. And so right now, I work full-time. I just moved over from the Indian health field to the city county health director, health officer position a couple months ago. So I'm new to this position. I started in May. This is my first time in 25 years that I haven't worked in Indian health. And I really credit, my ability to make that kind of transition because of all of the skills, resources, and tools that I picked up at UCSF in that program. At the same time, though, research is still very important to me. So I am doing my PhD, and that's how I got here. And I don't know exactly, I don't want to talk too long because I know we have other amazing people chatting. So I can go back and answer other details, but I'll pass it along to the next panelist.
Thank you, Deshane. Anne-Marie, could you also tell us your career story?
Sure. So I think the information is there, but I went to the biomedical sciences program at UCSF, the PhD program, graduating in 2006. So I've been out for a little while. After I finished my graduate work, I did a postdoc at the NIH with a PI who is now retired, Brian Murphy, at the Laboratory of Infectious Diseases. And then moved on to a position at a nonprofit called the Path Malaria Vaccine Initiative, which basically is an organization that funds research in malaria vaccine development. So there was a lot of portfolio management, scientific advising of our grantees, working with our funders like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and other funders. And I really enjoyed that. But I moved on about 5 years ago to the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, to their scientific review program. So basically, what we do is we are involved in the facilitation of peer review of applications that come in to requests for applications or kind of large complex grants to the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. I started out as a scientific review officer, and in that role, I would you read the applications when they come in, determine what kind of expertise you need to review them, identify subject matter experts from the scientific community who can serve on your review panel, and then go through that whole process and facilitate the review panel itself and write a report at the end, the summary statement that the investigator receives after the review is over. From that position, I was able to move up within the program to a deputy chief position. So now I'm more in management of the assignments and work plans for the staff at the scientific review program, as well as serving as kind of a subject matter expert for policy and practice questions that the scientific review officers may have. And that's about it.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. Miki, could you wrap us up for this question?
Yes. So hi, I'm Miki Sode. Thanks for having me here. And I'm happy to share my story. And I hope that's helpful in some way. So I was at bioengineering program, which is the joint program between UCSF and Berkeley. My lab was at UCSF Mission Bay campus under Sharmila Majumdar and Thomas Link. And my specialty or study was around osteoporosis and medical imaging, particularly X-ray and CT machines. So that's what I studied. And after I graduated, I became a product manager, then scientist at a clinical research organization called BioClinica. Back then it was called CINARC. A little side story, it's actually CINARC is it's a spin-off of UCSF radiology department. So essentially our organization help pharmaceutical companies to conduct clinical trials and specialized in anything that involves medical imaging. So that could it could be musculoskeletal diseases where I was at, or cardiovascular disease, neurology, and oncology. So I was there for about 5 years. That's right. So so that's very different from what I'm doing right now. You might think. Okay. So what happened was a baby happened. So I got a baby, and it was around the time that Elon Musk had a first success in launching a rocket. So the space is becoming very interesting to me. And I also have a space bug. So I forgot to mention that my undergraduate was at Berkeley in physics and astrophysics, but I also have a master's degree in aerospace engineering. I used to work at NASA during that time. So I had a space bug in me, is how we call it. And so it was very getting exciting. And then I know that I have to have a career in my life. Can't be a stay-at-home mom. So I had to send my son to daycare starting at 2.5 months old. And at that time, I was like, this does not make any sense to me. Why do I have to pay somebody so much money to take my baby away from me to take care, and so that I can go and work to pay for the daycare? That doesn't make any sense. But essentially, that around that time is when I said, like, okay, if I'm doing that, then I gotta be doing something that I feel passionate about, and then have it's a meaningful job. And I thought that I could make better contribution to society if I combine all the I think the training that I had and passion together, right? So then so that began a 3-year course to get to this job. So I did a networking, went to conference out of my pocket, staying at the mouse infested Airbnb in Boston. Networked the hell out of those experiences. And then I also tried to do a startup. made the logo and got a partner and the business card, but that was the extent of my startup experience. And then essentially what I realized is that there aren't too many, well, first of all, if you look at all the space-based research happened in space shuttle era as well as International Space Station, about half of them is life sciences. Pharmaceutical companies has been utilizing space to do a breakthrough, like a drug discovery experiments and stuff. So, for example, Duchenne muscle dystrophy drug was actually came out of the space-based experiments back in 90s, if I remember correctly. So anyway, so there's a lot of tie to life science in space. So I figured like, okay, I have a life science training, passion for space and background for space. That's a very weird combination, but that could be a unfair advantage or a little niche that I can serve. So that's how I started to get interested and started networking and eventually landed in the current job.
Thank you, Miki, very much. And we're going to start with you for the next question and then jump to Deshane for the second answer. And that is, we want our students and postdocs who are currently at the UCSF to define companies or working environments where they feel like they belong. And so my question to you first, Miki, is can you speak about navigating the companies that you work for, or client or field spaces holding the identity you hold? What the follow-up to that is, what major challenges did you or do you currently face, and what can those expect when they enter spaces similar to yours?
So it's true that type of job that I'm doing is very niche. We usually get kind of grouped into greater aerospace sector, but if you kind of flip it and look at aerospace industry, it's like the rocket, the satellites, the propulsion and all of that. So space-based research is a very niche field. But so I've been with the organization for about 4.5 years. Back then, there aren't many choices, but now there are more choices, meaning that there are commercial companies like Blue Origin, like we just saw Jeff Bezos going to space, or say the Virgin Galactic's Richard Branson just went to space, right? Suborbital flights. But also there are companies called Axiom Space, which is a first commercial space station is what they're trying to make. So, and the fact is that the ISS is currently scheduled to be decommissioned in 2024 or 5 timeframe. Maybe I think there is a good chance that it will be extended to 2030. So we have to think about the next, generation of the platform to conduct space-based experiments. So, but as I said, like there are many, not many, like more choices than when I was looking for my job. And in terms of like representation, I guess the aerospace industry just in general is very NASA dominated, or maybe if I can say the white male dominant area. So I am very kind of like oddball, the Asian and female, and but that's not to say that Asians and other countries are. I think I do see more of diversity coming into aerospace field. And then in terms of research, we actually do life science to physical sciences to traditional aerospace type of thing like remote sensing, and there's diversity there in the research community.
Thank you so much, Miki. Deshane, could you also answer that? And I could remind you if you want a reminder as well. What the questions.
No, that's okay. I pulled the questions up so that they would be there, which actually means I need to, because when I look at you guys, you're over here, but I realize you see me from over here. So I want to try to look at the camera when I'm actually talking. I know it feels disconnected to have me look over here. So in talking about navigating spaces, company, client, field. I guess what I would say is that whether it's, undergraduate, graduate, or the, quote unquote terminal degree, I consider education as the foundation and the jumping off point, the starting point, not the ending point when it comes to career aspirations. So, if you look at my master's in healthcare administration, that absolutely leads into the work that I'm doing. But, I'm in the public health field where I'm working with a lot of people who have masters in public health, PhD in public health, PhD in epidemiology, PhD in medical soc. And the world just is filled with gray areas, and it's not black and white. So everybody in public health does not have a public health degree. And so it's taking what you learned as part of your academic experience, your research experience, and finding ways to use that as a starting place to grow into whatever career really fuels you, whatever you're passionate about, whatever you think is that thing that you're going to wake up in the morning and be like, wow, I love that I get to wake up and do what I'm doing today. For me, being, so my mom is Native, my dad's white, but I grew up around my mom's family. And natives in general are very it's a very communal society and culture, and it's very it's not focused on the individual, it's focused on the community. And so the fact that I get to wake up every day and do something that is focused on improving the health and well-being of my community aligns with everything, my values, my traditions, everything that I was taught growing up. Like I get to do that. And I used my education at UCSF as a starting point to get where I am. And along the way, not only, have I now gone back and I'm doing my PhD in public health, but not all learning has to take place within the walls of academia. And, finding things that really interest me, so like Miki was talking about, so there might be a conference or a course or something that I want to go to that doesn't directly fall in line, so my employer's not going to pay for it. That doesn't mean I'm going to limit myself and say, okay, well, it's not a part of my job description. And even though it's really interesting, I'm just going to let that opportunity pass me by. It's investing in learning and knowledge that you think is going to help you get to where you want to be in life, whatever that looks like. So I guess I'll stop with that.
Thank you so much, Deshane. Anne-Marie, would you like to add anything to this as well?
Just a little bit, and that is that you may or may not be aware, but NIH is currently we've got a program that we've just developed called Unite, which is an internal set of committees that's dedicated to promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion at the NIH. So hopefully in the next few years, there will be more initiatives coming out of NIH to promote diversity in the government workspace. And we're doing that as well at the level of peer review and grant applications. There may be, actual sections in things other than training grants that require an element of diversity and inclusion in that grant application. So it's a process. I think that in the space that I'm in, we have a fairly good representation of people from all over the world, but not necessarily at the higher levels of management. So it's a work in progress.
Thank you so much, all of you, for those answers. And Deshane, you mentioned it, so I kind of want to skip to our question about values. It's something that I, in one-on-ones with students and postdocs, stress as even more important as compared to what your skills or interests are, because if a career is not meeting your values, even if it's something you love to do, you're going to be miserable. And so I would love if all of you could reflect on what your values were when you were at UCSF, and what values might have been met from that first role out of your time here, and how have they changed over time. And so I'll start with Deshane and go back to our alphabetical order format. So please kick us off with that.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, so like I started to allude to, a value that was instilled in me from the time, that I was born, was that I have a responsibility to give back to my community, that my community supports me, throughout my life cycle, and that I have a responsibility then to protect and serve that community. And for me, that comes through the field of public health. And, even back when I was 19 years old and just getting started in this, I started as a peer reproductive health outreach worker. And so my job at 19 years old was to go to a couple of the reservations in California and teach other Native teenagers, 17 to 24, 16 to 24, I think actually, to use condoms and to be responsible and to think about, STDs and pregnancy and all of that stuff. And the idea, is in whatever role I have found myself in, is how can I use that to bring some kind of benefit and value back to my community. And that's, in many times that is, sort of my native community, but like in my job right now, that's just my whole community, Missoula County. This is my geographical community. And my values absolutely have always been to, how can I get education, tools, resources, and skills that will allow me to then turn around and improve the health and status of my community and wherever I live. And I would say that really has not changed, that if anything, every step that I've taken in academia and in my career has really been led by those values, which is why I really, I hate, it sounds cheesy, but I've never worked a job I don't love since I was 19 years old. And that doesn't mean that some days are not easier and some days are much harder. Absolutely, especially being in public health, throughout the COVID pandemic, and especially being in a red state. And, we have a legislature that is absolutely outwardly and vehemently anti-public health. And I have to work within those kinds of constraints. So I have to try to improve health while having basically one or both hands tied behind my back. And it's my values, yes, but it's also knowing that I'm not alone in this. One of the things with UCSF, so I mentioned NAHA, but also just, my program. And at that time, she's retired now, but the director then was Mary Louise Fleming. And I spent a lot of time, and she was willing to spend time with me and just really talk about why this work is important and commiserate about why it is difficult, but also be really hopeful about why it's so important and why it's needed. And I think that, your time at UCSF and beyond, looking for those kind of people who really feed you intellectually, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually is really important. And because of that, I really don't think that my values have changed that much.
Thank you so much, Deshane. Anne Marie, could you also answer that question?
Sure. So for me, when I was in graduate school, I was very optimistic, and to the point of maybe being a little bit naive about the scientific field, just in terms of what was important to me was this sense of everybody collaborating and working together to achieve these important goals in public health, specifically in infectious diseases. And it was very important to me to be a part of that and to contribute to that. I realized a little bit later in graduate school that being in the lab was not the way that I wanted to do that. I wasn't really passionate about working on, one specific problem and really digging into it and turning that into a career. What I wanted to do was to have the opportunity to use my scientific knowledge in a broader area. So that led me to, but it was also very important to me to have an element of public service in what I did and remain in the public health space. So moving into the Path Malaria Vaccine Initiative and then NIH has given me the opportunity to really support and encourage basic and translational research in the sciences, and to use the values that I had. I really valued the idea of a collaborative, peer-led scientific community, and working in scientific review has really helped me to foster that. You bring this group of experts together, and it's up to them to think about, what is the best science that we can fund to move the field forward. Excuse me. And what do I want to say? To encourage, innovation, to encourage the scientific community to grow. So I really enjoy being in that space. And I think that it's a different it's a different area to be in, to decide to go into administration. You're a little bit more separated from the scientific research itself, but it gives you the opportunity to have a broader impact. And that was important to me.
Thank you so much. And Miki.
Yeah. So I wasn't thinking too much about value when I was in graduate school, but it's my nature that I've always been curious. I'm still curious, and that's why, as I said, that I did physics to astrophysics to aerospace to bone and imaging, which is all over the place. Basically, I let my curiosity drive me. But now I'm in this job, and I think I started to think deeper about where's this curiosity come from in a way. And then I'm at the moment, what my kind of conclusion or the current thinking is that it comes from humility, that I and then touched on. I could say that I do care about the public service aspects of it, that I learn a lot and gain lots of training, but how can I use that to make a world a better place, or to serve others, right? So I think there are many different ways to do it. So I think there was a beginning slide that any career path after PhD is a success. I believe so. There are many different ways that you could contribute back to the society. So what I do is that. And then I am putting on the curiosity there, because okay, what other ways can I do? How can I improve in what I do, or how I contribute, so that I can, foster innovation, or make space enable technology and opportunity to conduct space researching on ISS, or benefit from those research and technologies here on Earth to more people, right? Those are the things that I think more nowadays.
Thank you, all of you, for so much for answering that. And I always stress in some cases your values may not change over time in the case of Deshane, and that is great. But I think it's where some fear, apprehension, or self-doubt comes in places when those values change. And so I thank you all for talking about in cases when you may have had a change in your values over time, that especially you, Anne-Marie, like you said, that there are others like you if you're experiencing something like this, and there are people out there who can help give you advice. So with that, I'm going to, since you mentioned a little bit, Miki, about training and the skills that you've gained over time, I want to talk more about, or have you all answer, like, what skills did you get in your training in graduate school, whether it be master's or your current PhD program, in your case, Deshane? What do you use regularly? And then what skills did you need to learn and gain that wasn't provided to you during your time in graduate school or a postdoc? And we'll start with you, Miki.
All right, cool. So it was kind of serendipitous in a way that I ended up studying bioengineering. And the basics of bioengineering is like, let's bring medicine and biology and engineering together and see what happens. But that actually, that multidisciplinary nature of it, I think, is what I was drawn to it. And I think it's a very interesting viewpoint and kind of shaped how I see, the world as well. Like, the world is very, it's a very complex system. Like, the research is complex, right? Sometimes we get a research idea from, say, pharmaceutical company, then you might think like it must be life science, but it's actually not. It could be a material science. Like, how does the say tablet dissolve in the water? Or it could be physics, right? It could be chemistry. So the world is very multidisciplinary. So by going through the bioengineering program at UCSF Berkeley, I think I kind of learned to think that way, that there's a multifaceted, it's everything is multifaceted, and you could see it from different perspective, and that will give you a new insights that you didn't know before, right? So that's one thing. But another thing that I was going to mention is that this is actually something that I struggled a lot in graduate school, is actually confidence. I had an imposter syndrome, and I felt like I'm not good enough. Somebody's going to find out, right? I'm probably going to get C in biochemistry or something like that. I struggled a lot, but I think I came out strong after going through the program. That's not like taught per se. It's like kind of some lesson learned and skills that I acquired by going through the graduate program. So, but I think that's I needed that to say, like, you know what, I went through UCSF program, right? That was tough, but that gave me a confidence, like, hey, if I set my mind to it, then I can learn hard stuff. I can do hard stuff. Whatever my future might throw at me, right? So that helps a lot.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie.
So I would say there were a few things that I learned in graduate school that really have helped me along the way. The first one is kind of the obvious one, how to think about science, how to think critically about scientific problems that you might see, papers that you read, things like that. It really helped me to be able to look critically at a grant application, or at a scope of work, and try to understand where are the holes, what are the areas that could make this a more solid research proposal. But I also learned a lot about kind of navigating the politics of a government or any kind of workspace. I had a kind of a negative experience about halfway through grad school, where I was scooped by someone I considered a friend. And it really kind of brought into relief that, you have to have an element of, kind of protecting yourself and your work along, even in a space where things are meant to be collaborative and open. There's a balance, was what I'm trying to say, is that, I went in really, universally trusting everybody, and, with this kind of, my work wide open, and you can't necessarily succeed like that later on. I mean, it's just kind of a reality of working in science. You have to balance. And the other thing that I took away from graduate school was this experience in a broad variety of disciplines and infectious diseases. One of my supervisor has told me that one of the reasons that I got the job that I have, it was that because I had experience in a lot of different scientific areas, and that is something that UCSF gave to me. I was able to rotate in labs in virology and parasitology and bacteriology. I did my PhD in HIV and my postdoc in paramyxoviruses, and then I moved into malaria. So I had kind of this broad vision of infectious diseases. So I think that, there's a place for you if you don't necessarily want to focus in tight on one area of scientific research. If you want to keep your option, if you want to keep your mind open, and not that you wouldn't if you were in academia, but if you want to keep learning all the time about different areas of science, there are careers that will allow you to do that.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. Since you mentioned it, I dropped a link in our chat about how do you navigate politics in a workplace, and we have some resources on our website for that, so you'll find the link there. And last, for the same question, Deshane, could you answer what your skills provided you in your training at UCSF, and what did you need to learn in the workplace?
Yeah, and I think, it's similar, so I won't belabor it too much, but absolutely, I think critical thinking, the scientific method translates throughout research and academia, but also just into general aspects of life. And so, our master's program in healthcare administration is really a marriage of research and administration, and how we use the scientific method to inform practices on the administrative side that really have better, because they have better science behind them, they have a better chance at being successful, effective, efficient, and being able to really put that lens of critical reflection in every aspect of life and work, I think is something that is a skill set that I definitely developed as part of the master's program. And similar to what's been mentioned, and I don't know if it is really, it would be a hard skill to necessarily teach, but one skill that I've had to really learn is how to have a thick skin. And when you're dealing with criticism, you can look and say, okay, this is the information that I can really use to make improvements. This person, the criticism that I'm receiving has merit and has value because I can use it to make these kinds of improvements. But the rest of the world is not going to be that robotic, and they're not only going to give you criticism that's helpful and valuable. They're also going to, you know, throw in some stuff that it can be really demoralizing and deflating, and developing persistence, developing the ability to let that sort of that experience and that process that happens very frequently in intersocial reaction situations. It's something that really, it's a skill that I'm only beginning to develop over time. Like but it's become an essential skill, especially like I mentioned, you know, working in public health in Montana through a pandemic, you know, where healthcare, public health professionals are seen as the bad guys. I've become, in the space of 2 years, I went from being, you know, a largely invisible but you know, very positive role within the community to being, you know, the number one villain. And having to learn how to be okay with that is a challenge. And so I think even though I do give a lot of credit to the critical thinking development that happened in my master's program, I think there's also just some emotional intelligence that has to be developed over time somehow.
Thank you to all of you for your responses there. Speaking of working in a non-academic or like in a non-laboratory space, so for many of those who will watch this or are attending now, the only position they've ever held might be in an academic laboratory doing research. So this is mainly for Anne-Marie and Miki. Like, can you talk about what was the thing that surprised you most about working in a space that wasn't that environment? And we'll start with let's start with Anne-Marie.
Okay. So I think the thing that surprised me most was the transition between kind of being my own little island, you know, in terms of the research I was doing in graduate school. I was directing what I was doing, you know, to the extent that you can as a graduate student. And I would collaborate some with my colleagues in the lab, but for the most part, it was a very kind of independent study. And when I moved into a non-academic field, what I found was that you need to work in large teams a lot more. I would be in matrix teams with people in business administration and finance and, you know, all the legal and all the other aspects of the research enterprise that are necessary for success. And I've seen the same thing in the scientific review program, where, you know, you end up working in matrix teams a lot more often. And that kind of, you need to learn how to work with people who have different backgrounds, who have different perspectives, different priorities than you do necessarily, and make sure that, you know, your stakeholders are getting what they need while you're getting what you need. And that's a balance. You know, you can't just be driven by, you know, by your own priorities. You have to think about, you know, what other people need and how you can provide it to them so that they can help you as well. And so I think that that surprised me. It was very different from what I'd done in the past, and it was a skill that I had to develop over time. But it also was a very positive experience for me. It helped me to build confidence. I was and still am, you know, pretty introverted. But to be able to work in a team and make sure that your voice is heard, you have to come out of your shell a little bit. And so that it really helped me to do that, to start to work in these spaces.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Miki, could you also answer that?
Yeah, so I have 2 points to make. The first one is that it surprised me that the public sector, or where, especially where I work, is very bureaucratic and political, more than I thought. So as I said, like I deal with space-based research, but I can't be just focusing on the research because International Space Station is, first of all, is an international collaboration. And also we work very closely with NASA, which is, public sector, right? But the reason why our organization is different from NASA, we are separate from NASA, is that we work closely with private sector. So we work with academic institutions, companies of all sizes, from 2 people startup in a garage to Fortune 500 companies. The other governmental agencies like NIH and NSF, the companies that you don't necessarily associate with space, like Target Corporation or Lamborghini or Nickelodeon, right? So anyhow, that's a long story. But I need to understand, say, the administration's policy around like science and technology, or what to do with ISS when it's time to come down, and that's not an easy thing to navigate, and like some priorities within science. So I have to have a very broad view of different actors and how they think, what they care about. Where the politics is going and all of that. So that's something that I was very shocked that I can't be just focusing on research. I have to think like more holistic view, because that's affect my work, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is that because I see many different project coming through my desk. That could be a basic science discovery type of project of different discipline, like life science to plants to some sensors to look at ocean plastics to combustions and transport phenomena and all of that stuff. So I think especially if you're coming from academic institution, academic background, it's easy to get so tied up to your particular niche or particular discipline. So, I see many entrepreneurs do that, like fall in love with the technology and think this is awesome. But often it's a solution that's looking for problems and kind of lost the sense of where the problem is, or think about the user or the people actually might benefit from it. So like maybe human-centered design is another way to put it, but people kind of tend to forget that, or forget where they fit in the more holistic system. So those are the things that I thought it's important, but also see that it's very surprising that I have to have that viewpoint. I can't just like be focus on particular, like one niche area. I have to see what other factors are affecting what I care about. So, yeah.
Thank you, Miki and Anne-Marie, for that. This next question is for all of you, and that is related to an earlier question, but like we want students and postdocs to be able to find places where they feel like they belong. We also want to help them identify, in this case, agencies at the federal or state level that are equitable and inclusive. And so could each of you talk about what it's like, what is the culture of your public sector spaces? So I guess Anne-Marie and Miki are more federal, like US level, and then Deshane for the state level, especially a state like Montana. So since Miki, you just ended, I'm going to skip back to Deshane, and we'll go in alphabetical order this time again.
And sorry, Michael, can you repeat? So
talk about your company, I guess, well, your agency's culture, thinking about what is the culture of working in the public sector, in public health, and at the state level as compared to Anne Marie and Miki, who work at more federal, national level.
So one of the things about being in local government in Montana is that I don't wear a shirt and tie to work anymore. I did when I was in DC, and I did when I was in San Francisco, and I don't now. This is about as formal as you'll see me get, and this is the same outfit that I would wear to go have a meeting with our mayor or our county commissioners, and they would be dressed exactly the same way. And so the culture here is laid back in a way that is both progressive and advantageous as well as disadvantageous, in that Missoula is a very progressive county in a state that is led by very non-progressive thinking people. And we have in public health, and I'm not sure how true this is for the others, so I'll let them talk about it. But in public health, public policy impacts my daily life. And policy is not made by health experts and public health experts. Policy is made by elected officials. And so here, both in Missoula and at the state level, I have to have, no matter how challenging or in my case for the local area, great, but at the state level, challenging or very sort of adversarial those relationships can be, I still have to keep good relationships with elected officials who know nothing about health science. They most of them are not trained in any kind of research, and in Montana, a lot of our legislators are either farmers, ranchers, business people, local business people. So they're not gonna come at problems with the same kind of approach that I do, yet they are key partners in getting the work done that I need to get done for public health. And so a large part of my job is trying to help someone see and understand an argument that I'm making or a point of view that I'm making that is completely opposite to their worldview, their beliefs. And I can't just say, oh, well, I don't want to work with I don't want to work with the governor anymore, so I'm going to just cut off all communication. I don't want to work with, my local city council, so I'm just going to stop all communication. I can't do that. I have to work through these very complex and challenging political relationships. And yeah, I think what I mentioned before still holds true, is that when I can find those people in my professional sphere who get it, who understand why I'm trying to do the work that I'm doing, and understand the not just the why but the what, what it is that we're trying to do. I value those people, and I use them to recharge my energy professionally, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, for the work that I'm trying to do. On some days, it would be very easy for me to go home and say, I'm never going back to that office again. And finding those people who can really help energize me is what keeps me coming back to an environment where I get to work every day with an amazing team of health professionals, and we do not operate in a silo. We do not operate in a bubble. I have to operate in an environment where there's a website called MissoulaCountyTyranny.com where they're constantly disparaging me. And that doesn't mean that I stop doing my work. So I would say, the culture is one of extreme dedication but also extreme challenge. And I don't know if I really hit that question, but.
Yeah, I think you did. I actually also have a follow-up question to you, thinking about your previous experiences, because I know I've met in my decade of we're doing this kind of work, I've met a few graduate students and postdocs whose desire is to work and do outreach and education for historically excluded populations. And since we've previously worked with Native American populations, can you talk about that? Same question, but and from that perspective, from working with those groups.
One of and I put this in, there was questions sent to us ahead of time and we answered them, so I answered it via email, but one of, I think, a very important skill or approach is to be able to take all of this really great foundational knowledge and experience that we get in academia and learn how to apply it to the real world outside of academia. And that's, so when we talk about the public sector, I mean, that's literally what we do every day. But then you can take that one step further and translating it to what that means for this population, this community versus that population in that community. And so, yeah, I just, it's the basic foundation and knowledge and skills are the same, but how I use them, depending on whether I'm working in Indian health or I'm working in city county health, there's nuances there. And so when I'm working in Indian health, you know, for example, I'll use COVID as an example. So at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, I was still in Indian health, and now I'm over in public health. And so over in Indian health, when you know, there is a huge amount of vaccine hesitancy within Native American populations. When we look at, you know, just our regular you know, childhood vaccines, influenza, those kinds of vaccines, there's huge levels of hesitancy because of the historic relationship between medicine and Native Americans. You know, that has not been a great relationship in the past. And so, but at the same time, as a health professional, knowing that COVID vaccines are essential to protect and preserve the health of our community. And so my messaging, when I was, you know, the director of All Nations, our local Indian Health Center, the messaging there was around, we need to step up and do this to protect our elders and the children in our community and the most vulnerable members of our community. And we have that social responsibility to do this, not for ourselves, but for them. And then move over to public health. And that same messaging honestly was not as effective. And finding out right away that there was a different approach to the messaging. So now over here at City County Public Health, what we do is, hey, if you get your vaccine, you don't have to isolate if you are a close contact and you're not symptomatic. You don't have to miss school and work. You can, you know, keep going to, you know, bars, and in life is you, and it's all about you. Like, this is what the benefit that you as the individual get out of it. So we're doing the same work. It's the same end goal, but we adapt how we get there based on the community that we're working in. So I guess I would say that.
Thank you so much, and thank you for answering a question out of left field that wasn't prepped in advance. But so then the same question for Anne-Marie and Miki. So what's the culture of working for an agency at the federal or national level? I'm going to start with Anne-Marie.
So I think that, you know, working for an organization as big as the NIH, there are kind of cultures within cultures. If you look at the culture within the scientific review program where I am, it's extremely collaborative. You know, people will go out of their way to help each other, to step in when there's a lot of work to be done. For instance, you know, there were 2 huge requests for applications for COVID basic research that we managed in this past year. And we received over 2,000 applications in about 4 months, which is more than we usually get in total in a year. So we really had to come together and have that collaborative relationship within the program. But if you look at the NIH more broadly, it's also our responsibility to make sure that the policies and regulations that have been put in place by the US government for peer review of grant applications and contract proposals are maintained and are followed. And they're very important to make sure that you have a fair and unbiased review to follow these regulations. So there's a lot of bureaucracy on top of what we do as well. And you have to learn how to navigate that. When can you go to upper management with a question that you have? What needs to come to the attention of people above you, so that later on they don't get blindsided by a request from Congress that they didn't see coming. It's a culture of, I think it's a collaborative culture within your smaller space, but when you look at the larger bureaucracy, you do have to manage a lot of politics, a lot of rules and regulations that are put in place, which most of the time make sense, but sometimes they don't. But it's still your responsibility to make sure that they're followed, and to interact with very, very different groups of stakeholders. I don't know if anybody read about it today, but Dr. Tony Fauci gave a testimony to Congress yesterday, and it was very contentious. So you have to be ready to work with stakeholders like Deshane said, who have very different worldviews than you do, and to basically talk about these issues in a way that they can understand, in a way that makes them feel as if they're being heard, and can kind of bring you closer together in terms of your opinions and the path that needs to be taken in that space.
Thank you so much. And Miki, if you could wrap us up.
Yeah, so one thing that I can say about the industry that I'm in is that everybody's very passionate, which is great. And also because it's a fast changing field where it used to be very dominated by like NASA or big aerospace company like Boeing, Lockheed, all those big names. But now we are seeing SpaceX, Blue Origin, other companies, other countries like India, China launching their own vehicle, right? That I think there is a little bit of, struggle that some people would like to hold on to their legacy, and there's a lot to learn from history and the legacy, but also how much should we be open to the new entrants, make room for more diverse players. So I think I could see how I wish it was a flip of a switch to kind of okay, we're open to new people, but that's not happening, especially like NASA is big. And so some corner is faster than the other, right? So that's that. But I am excited that shift is happening, that more people are getting more open-minded, more inclusive. And I hope that would keep trending, and so that many different players can come in, or more people could take advantage of the access to space. Yeah.
Thank you so much, all of you, for your answers. I think we'll wrap up there for the moderated portion of this. If you're watching this recording, thank you for watching, and we hope that you'll check out our other Alumni Career Paths videos.